Hi, and welcome to the second half of the show. Everyone always asks the question, how safe is my child's school? How safe is my school? Well, throughout the 6 years of the show, we focused in on a lot of things that can make schools unsafe, from school shootings to violence to gang activity, drug activity, and bullying. The two things that are most important are safety and discipline. Now schools are assigned to have metal detectors, which brings us to the question, should schools have metal detectors? I posted a poll by this community just moments ago, and you can still vote. You can vote. Just over 30 minutes ago, I posted this poll, and you can still vote, and I'll have your reaction on Friday's show. Let's get to this story.
However, metal detectors could be coming to high schools in Boston. Some city councilors want to see them installed.
But is that the right move? Tonight, in our Question Everything series, WBZ's Mike Sullivan asks, do metal detectors really keep our kids safe?
A child does not just get a gun.
It's a scary thought.
It's in the headlines, it's on TV, it's certainly top of mind.
The demand, frankly, is coming from parents and guardians.
Is my child safe at school?
This year alone, there's been a shooting, stabbing, they've recovered loaded firearms.
My fear is that what's it going to take for people to see?
In a letter to Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, several Boston city councilors are calling for zero tolerance on violence, asking the city to beef up police and to add more metal detectors in schools.
I've seen enough, we've heard enough, we've talked to enough parents. We need to act now.
But are more metal detectors the answer? Do they really work? Of all the school deterrents against weapons, researchers suggest.
They're actually among the least common.
A report out of the West End Justice and Prevention Research Center says as of 2017, New York City schools reported of the weapons confiscated in a single school year, 57% were found without scanning devices. Furthermore, for every 23,000 students scanned, just one dangerous item was found.
That there was an incident at Charlestown High.
They didn't want to plug their metal detectors in, but they had a shooting at graduation. Earlier this year, they had a loaded gun in the school.
Counselors Erin Murphy and Michael Flaherty say numerous Boston schools choose to leave their detectors unplugged or cast aside.
Which is something I didn't know, that it could be a school-by-school basis.
School safety researchers suggest metal detectors can create long lines to get in or give students a sense of fear.
There is technology out there with different types of metal detectors and checking for weapons different ways, so absolutely open to see.
Counselor Murphy was on a call with the Boston superintendent this morning discussing technology alternatives. Brockton High dealt with logistics issues before they turned to a high-tech weapons detection system over metal detectors.
With our $1.4 billion school budget, we need to do a better job communicating.
Over the past year, Murphy says there have been 744 sexual assaults in Boston schools and 440 cases of bullying.
I feel like your school is saying, well, you can spend money and you can install metal detectors, or you can put a big show of having like police dogs come in, but those aren't the sort of things that really make schools safe.
Ben Fisher is a University of Wisconsin professor who has researched security measures in schools. He says it is more about
The structures of schools, structures of our communities, more than it is just installing a metal detector or buying some program.
But if we're able to confiscate a weapon, we can engage that child, that student in a conversation, find out what's happening.
Was that student recently assaulted or threatened? Why are they scared to come to school?
Make sure every student has an adult in the building who they know cares about them.
A reason to protect their classmates, regardless of technology. In Boston, I'm Mike Sullivan, WBZ News.
And that could really help out. So really, metal detectors in our schools? Give me a break. I mean, are we moving to a school-to-prison pipeline? Probably not. Like we talked about, I mean, we want discipline and safety in our schools, but we don't need to be felt like we're in prison. It's just a lot of things happen. Like, here's a list of things that make schools safe: security, teachers, administrators, and staff members make our students safe. That's safe. Unsafe is guns, knives, and other social media threats, verbal threats, etc. Those are the unsafe side. What else can be done? There is a program that will help monitor just every one of these threats. We'll get to that in the near future. But there is now a threat that's happened in
Student has been taken into custody after allegedly making threats against Central Middle School in Bartlesville. So the Bartlesville Police Department says these rumors were made on social media. Extra security will be on site as the investigation continues. That student is facing charges in connection with a terroristic hoax.
So try to understand, if you're going to make a threat, if you're going to post a threat, fake or real, you're going to be going to prison. You think threats are funny? You think it's threatening to say, oh, I'm going to go shoot up my school. That's a threat right there, and you're going to jail if you do. So this is very serious. If you think you're going to post that fake or real, you're not only going to get out of school, but you're going to jail. What we need is a scared straight program for all the kids. A lot of talk shows have done that with kids. They put them in jail. There was also a scared straight movie back in 1978. I would recommend, for educational purposes, that you would show them this video. If you feel like taking the students to prison is not a good thing, what I would have you do is have them watch scared straight videos on YouTube. That way they would know what to do. Bit later on, we're going to focus now on a program that would help out all these school threats. That's a bit later on. But coming up next, more about the Children of the Harvest. So far, the Flores family has moved out of Michigan. But will they still find work? Dennis Murphy continues. Stay with us. On our last episode, we focused in on the Flores family as they traveled throughout the country harvesting the fruit of the land. So far, they made it out of Texas, Arkansas, and Indiana, and Michigan. But will they still find work now that Pablo Flores is broke? Here again, Dennis Murphy.
2 weeks, 2,000 miles from home, and their luck's been running about as rough as their van. Finally, they catch a break. In Fremont, Ohio, farmer Mike Yeagle needs people to pick his cucumber crop, and he has free housing, too. On June 24th, the Flores unpack in what will be their home for 8 weeks of work. It's a converted barn. Old mattresses, bare light bulbs, no running water inside, outhouse out back. James will share a bed with 2 of his brothers.
We will use this graph to do
For the first week, James goes to a school program set up to keep migrant kids out of the fields. His sister and younger brothers attend too. But when the cucumbers are ready for picking, James's teacher finds an empty classroom seat.
He didn't come for like 4 days in a row, I believe. We really miss him here.
James is in the fields, working side by side with his father and older brothers, bent over a 6-hour day, 7 days a week. And he says the bending hurts his back, and the lifting can't help much either. When a bucket is full, it weighs about 25 pounds, a third as much as he does.
This bone hurts a lot.
Which bone? Show me.
The spinal.
The spine bone hurts?
Yeah.
From what? From stooping or from
bending
over like that?
From bending over.
Labor Department officials say it is against the law for a child this young to be working in the fields, unless it's on a small farm or his family's own farm.
Perhaps that's why Pablo didn't tell Farmer Yeagle up front that his 11-year-old, James, was going to pick. The boy is working off the books. His cucumber tally is credited to his father and brothers. The more you pick, the more you're paid. Out here in the real world of the fields and blood obligations to family, the regulatory universe of child labor laws and government inspectors has all but disappeared.
James, could you ever go to your dad and say, you know what? I don't want to work today. I feel tired, I'm pooped, I'm not going to go out.
No.
Why not?
He'll take a lot of time. And he gets more tired.
So, if you don't go to work, your father's going to get more tired.
Yes, because he's going to get my work.
He's going to get your work if you don't go. Is that the way you see it?
And Dad, Pablo needs every hand he can get to help him make ends meet. He sometimes relies on food stamps, but says he never collects welfare or unemployment insurance. He has no problem with his son working beside him.
If he wants to be next to me, you know, there's going to be nobody who can get him off the farm.
But it's the law.
I understand it's the law, but the law can do anything against a person's will.
In school, James's best subject is math. Out here, he's not only the best picker, he's also the family bookkeeper.
How much money do you make picking pickles?
Like $1,024
per week.
For a good week, maybe like $1,024.
The farmer, Mike Yeagle, can see the 20-acre cucumber patch from his house, but he's got plenty of other chores to do. He works 1,300 acres, mostly corn and soy, with his brother. He tells us the farm earns them a comfortable but by no ways extravagant lifestyle. Yeagle drove his dad's tractor at 8 and personally thinks there's nothing wrong with children doing most farm work. But he's mindful of the law.
Youngsters under the age of 12 can't even be in the pickle field.
So if they're 10, they're too young to be there.
Right.
If they're 11, they're too young to be there.
Yeagle seems to have no idea that there is a child working adult hours in his own fields.
Mike, you got that very situation this year. You got the 11-year-old there, 7 days a week, 7 8-hour days.
In my field, it shouldn't be happening if it is. And despite what maybe Dad wants, I'll have to put a stop to it.
But the next morning, when Yeagle's brother hands out paychecks in the fields,
Well, here's your check for last week's pickles.
James is picking right there in full view, but no one stops him. He'll continue picking for the remaining weeks of the season. And the cucumbers he picks roll down a country road, not to a farm stand, but to the plant of a food processing giant, the Heinz Company. From James's hand to our supermarket shelves. How many other children are out there picking illegally? No one knows for sure. But when the Associated Press took these photos in 1997, it reported finding 104 children working illegally in agriculture in a 5-month period, including this 4-year-old in the chili fields of New Mexico. Go! In South Haven, Michigan, kids are diving headfirst into the annual Blueberry Festival. But 11-year-old Yvette Villanueva doesn't have time for kid stuff. She's busy working against the seasonal clock. We followed Yvette and her family up from South Texas. Like James Flores, Yvette is an American citizen. She and her family are picking a blueberry crop in western Michigan, 200 miles from where James and his family are picking cucumbers. Yvette, who dreams of someday becoming a doctor, doesn't want to be here in the fields getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. But she and her 9-year-old brother Javier feel they owe their parents.
I feel like proud of myself because I'm helping my parents and everything. And I feel like if I'm responsible to pay them back for everything they have done for us.
A late spring freeze followed by a summer drought has conspired to make for a bad berry year. Yvette, Javier, and the rest of the family pick from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. with a lunch break. But because the crop is bad, it takes a long time to fill the buckets. Their price per bucket on this day translates to about $2.30 an hour, way below minimum wage, $5.15 an hour. The farmer they're picking for, Richard Dukowski, knows that this season is a mutt. And he knows that some people will blame the growers for the plight of migrant workers.
It's very easy to say, well, these farmers, they're villains, they're terrible. Man, what a cop-out.
Dukowski's berry farm was planted by his father in the 40s. Migrant families like the Villanuevas provide the labor to keep his small acreage afloat. But he doesn't see any way they'll make a living wage this season, and it saddens him.
God, they're so grossly underpaid, I'll tell you something. It's sickening.
So you pay them more money than they get now. Problem solved.
I pay them. First, I got to get it before I can give it to them.
When the picking runs out, Yvette works in the shed packing blueberries. It has been a long day, and she seems to be nodding off.
This girl's 11 years old, Rich. Let me ask you something. Did you see her crying? Are there any bruises on her body? I was 11 years old harvesting onions on a South Holland farm in Illinois. How do I look to you today?
Hard work and clean air may build body and character, but farm work is also one of the most dangerous occupations there is. Just this year, an hour's drive from Rich Dukowski's farm, a 9-year-old died in the fields after his father accidentally ran over him with a truck. According to this General Accounting Office report, 59 child workers died on farms between 1992 and 1996, and 400 to 600 are injured each year. And then there's the controversial matter of pesticides. Is a safe level for a farm worker weighing 150 pounds still safe for a child who weighs half that? Or for a 25-pound 2-year-old? Some researchers believe that children in the fields are more vulnerable to pesticides than adults. Yet pesticide safety standards set by the Environmental Protection Agency don't take that into account.
Ice cream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream.
Of course, migrant children aren't working drudges all the time. They do find time to play and to dream bigger dreams. But a visitor to their world apart of fields and shabby trailer homes has to wonder if the eye blink of childhood isn't being taken from them.
Guys, if we could have a genie come out of a bottle, right, and give you a wish, would let you do anything you wanted this summer, what would you ask the genie to give you?
I would tell him to let me rest for a while and stop picking for the summer.
Let you have a little rest. How about you, Javier?
Be rich, so we don't have to go picking. Oh my God.
September 13th, Yvette and her brother make their first communion in Michigan. And then their migrant summer, a disappointing one, is finished. The family had hoped to bring at least $8,000 back to Texas with them, but after expenses, they've saved only about $3,500. They could try to recoup by staying north to pick apples, but Yvette's parents have decided to head home so the kids can get back in school in Texas. A little late, but still in time to make up their work. James isn't that lucky. By the time school starts in Texas, he's still in Ohio, helping his father and older brothers drop a new transmission into the heap. Once the work on the van is done, the Flores are all heading south to Florida to see what they can find there.
This is the final check.
They're leaving behind Farmer Yeagle, who's thinking ahead to his corn and soy harvest, unaware that the Flores family's bad luck has already rubbed off on him. After expenses, Pablo and family have saved up $3,600 picking cucumbers. Figure in the cost of living expenses for 10, and it's apparent they'll need to do better than that to get the water and lights hooked up back in Texas. Back in their cinder block house, where unbeknownst to them, something has been going on. The family leaves the Yeagle place on a gray day. It looks like rain, but the van's wipers have stopped working, so they detour to a junkyard and buy a used windshield wiper motor. As they're installing it, the side door falls off. Pablo Flores, the Job of the migrant trail, lashes down the door with a wire hanger he keeps for emergencies. It's August 24th, and James and his family are looking for the freeways to the Sunshine State. Maybe early citrus is in. Maybe their luck will improve. Just maybe.
Just maybe. When we return, is this any life for a child? The father defends his choices. As Dennis Murphy continues Children of the Harvest. Stay with us. Well, as you've seen, James Flores is doing illegal work with his father. Because at the right age, if you're 12 years old in most states, you're old enough to work in the fields. And that's the irony. You could be working, you could be too young to be stock produce at the grocery. No one will stop you with the backbreak of picking it. So now, the family is moving towards Florida to see what they can find. But, will the van survive? Once again, here's Dennis Murphy.
There are oranges to be picked in Florida, they hope, if only the Flores' decrepit vehicle can get them there. In Ohio, it's the oil pump. Later, the engine overheats. While some of the children play or nap in the stifling heat, James, as always, finds ways to help his dad. In Tennessee, they're stopped by a state officer. He says he pulled them over because he saw something flapping out of the rear door of the van. But he seems as interested in the family's legal status. Of course, Pablo doesn't need a green card because he's a U.S. citizen, has been his whole life. Eventually, the officer is satisfied. They continue on their way. Pablo stops to sleep just a few hours at a time. It will take them 2.5 days to reach Florida. They have been gone from their home in Texas for 2.5 months. On August 26th at 1:30 in the morning, the road-weary Flores family of 10 descends on a 3-bedroom house in Orlando, Florida. It's the home of one of Pablo's older sons who works construction. While Pablo figures out what to do next, he enrolls James in the local 6th grade. School has been underway for 2.5 weeks.
But actually, I went over that.
People might look at you, Mr. Flores, and say that you are an obstacle to James's growth because you're always moving him about, keeping him in the fields when he might be in school.
No, I'm just trying to make him see what life is really about so he can understand what the value of an education is.
Within weeks, the Flores kids have problems at their new school. James's 2 older brothers are suspended for threatening a teacher. They find construction work and consider dropping out of school altogether. Pablo, meanwhile, waits for work picking oranges. But the crop is late this year. He'll be unemployed for the next 6 weeks. He's run through about $1,000 of the $3,600 that he and the kids have saved from the last job. As Pablo sat waiting as summer became fall, we wondered if the Heinz Company back in Ohio was aware that it had bought cucumbers picked by an 11-year-old. It turned out they had learned that Dateline had recorded James working in the field of one of its contract growers. Ron Brooks is Vice President of Agriculture for Heinz North America.
When people see 11-year-old James Flores from Texas picking cucumbers that are on their way to a Heinz facility in Ohio, Heinz' reaction to that is what?
Well, that's wrong, and we just won't tolerate it. And we have taken corrective action with that grower. We won't be doing business with him.
Him, of course, was Mike Yeagle, the farmer who said he didn't know he had a kid working for him until we told him.
20 years of pickles with Heinz.
Yeah.
And they told you don't bring him anymore.
Yeah.
Are you the poster boy now?
I'm the poster boy. Even though I didn't know it, I'm still responsible for it. And I can't completely disagree with it.
Yeagle says he told Heinz what had happened. And he says he also talked to Pablo and told him James could not work the fields.
Did he say the boy wouldn't pick anymore?
Well, at the time, here again, I didn't police the field every day.
In fact, he did pick for the rest of that season.
I guess he was out there not all of the time, but off and on.
More on than off, according to what James and his father told us. But Yeagle feels he's been put in a difficult position.
The processor is saying, we don't want these kids working. The family head doesn't see any reason why they can't work.
And you're caught in the middle.
I'm caught in the middle. I'm a farmer. I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not a police officer.
Heinz provided us with this binder full of documents outlining its efforts to improve migrant conditions and prevent child labor. And yet, the company cited only one previous instance, just one, in which it had terminated a grower for a child labor violation.
Do you think they're being a little hypocritical?
Yes, I do.
In what way?
Well, in singling me out rather than working with me.
Is this farmer being punished, Ron, because he was candid and came forward and said, you know what? This was happening. I wasn't aware of it, but the TV people happened to be here. What are we going to do? Is it not just zero tolerance, but also putting the fires out of a public relations problem?
No, it's not at all. Our policy, and it's clearly stated, and growers know that we have a zero tolerance for this sort of thing.
You know what? If you and I got in a car on any July day, picked a field, we'd probably find some young ones out there.
Well, Dennis, I don't know that if we just drove around in every field we'd find them. I can't say that that's the truth.
But when we first started looking into this story in the summer of 1997, Dateline saw underage kids working in these same Ohio farmlands on several different farms, including this one that grew under contract to Heinz. In fact, that's where we found this 2-year-old learning the ways of the fields from her older aunts and uncles.
If Heinz were to apply the letter of their law as strictly as they did to you, to the other growers, how many pickles do you think they'd get at the end of the summer?
Heinz is going to find themselves out of the pickle business.
Of course, there are federal inspectors mandated with preventing child labor. But in the state of Ohio, there are just 35 of them, and their inspection beat includes industry as well as agriculture. Finding James Flores working would be like spotting a needle in a pickle patch. Mike Yeagle hasn't decided whether he'll try to grow pickles for some other company next year. But if he does, he says he'll avoid hiring families with underage kids.
My problem this year was Pablo Flores and one 11-year-old.
But it wasn't just one 11-year-old working on Yeagle's farm this summer. There was another child. This boy we saw working on that same pickle patch. He told Dateline producers he was the same age as James.
Another 11-year-old boy working in the fields. We talked about one, but there was another.
All right, well, again, I'm not saying that's not impossible. That's very possible that could have happened also.
And then, not to make this farmer's life miserable, but we had to ask about a serious problem with the Flores family's pay stub and timesheets. A problem that we had called to Mike Yeagle's attention much earlier in the season, but hadn't been fixed. By our reckoning, it appears that Yeagle paid the 5 members of the Flores family who were working on the books about $4.20 an hour for the season, nearly a full $1 less than minimum wage.
It looks like they're about $1,200 short for their season.
Well, I'm not saying that's not possible.
So it's possible they came all those miles from Texas with that awful van and worked for 7 days straight and they didn't even make minimum wage.
That's possible.
Yeagle says his other migrant families had no trouble meeting or exceeding the minimum wage because they were simply much better cucumber pickers than the Flores. Nonetheless, the law requires the farmer to make sure that his migrants make at least minimum wage, $5.15 an hour.
The law says every week goes by they got to be making minimum wage up to snuff.
Correct. Yeah. If in fact your figures are correct, it just simply got away from us, and we weren't following it as closely as what we should.
Back in Florida, late October now, and there are finally oranges to pick. But the Flores family is back in the van, headed home to Texas. There has been an unexpected family crisis. Pablo's companion and the children's surrogate mother, Norma, had to leave to go home to Mexico to take care of her ailing mother. Pablo told us that he had to give her $2,000 of his dwindling savings. Florida has turned out to be a total bust. Wasted gas, wasted time. Without Norma, Pablo is concerned that there's no one to watch over the kids. So they're all back on the road, the last leg of a journey that no one expected to end in a rainbow and a pot of gold, but neither did they expect the ugly low blow to the spirit that's waiting for them back in Texas, back in their cinder block house.
Well, when we come back, the journey's about to end, but the repercussions are just beginning. Dennis Murphy concludes Children of the Harvest. Stay with us. Now the conclusion to our story. You've heard from the Flores family as they traveled from Texas to Ohio to Florida. Now they're going to travel back from Florida to Texas. But will it be enough? Prepare to be amazed and angry as something dreadful is about to happen. With more tests on the way home and a surprise they could not have imagined when waiting for them to get there. Once again, Dennis Murphy.
They're closing the circle now, westbound on Interstate 10 across the Gulf Coast states, heading home to the Texas Valley. It's the 3rd week of October. John Glenn is preparing to re-enter space. The Yanks have won the World Series. And James drowses in the back of the van. At a rest stop in Alabama, just when you think that van actually might limp them home, the Flores get a cruel and nasty surprise. The van is on fire. ignition has sparked a blaze in the engine housing. For a few moments, it looks as though the entire van is going to go up. The boys frantically bat at the flames. Rip the engine covering off and toss it on the pavement. The family is tired and irritable. All they want to do is get home, and now this. The fire becomes a symbol for the mostly futile summer and fall they looked for work. Why is James out here on I-10 on a Friday in October? This boy who won't be old enough to work in most stores for 2.5 more years. And yet he's been out in the fields, bent over picking, all but invisible since the age of 7. The Department of Labor in Washington is responsible for enforcing our nation's child labor laws. We showed some of our footage to Assistant Secretary of Labor, Susan King.
What really gets you when you see that is that in this day and age, at the end of this century, we're still seeing pictures that we would have expected to see at the beginning of this century.
What can we, the consumer, do? How can we be assured that we're going to get a pickle that isn't
They can't
picked
be
by a
assured.
10-year-old?
They cannot
A tomato picked by an 11-year-old?
Unfortunately, they cannot be assured. They cannot know that exactly what they got has never been touched by a child's hand.
I'll pay you 50 cents more for the jar of pickles. I don't want to be eating pickles picked by a kid. Can you guarantee me that?
I can't guarantee that, but I can guarantee you that we're trying to do something about it.
She's talking about Operation Salad Bowl, an initiative launched this past year by Secretary of Labor Alexis Herman to put more inspectors in the fields and to crack down on child labor.
We're going in unannounced, on weekends, on holidays, early in the morning.
How many violations did you cite?
They say they did about 1,500 investigations. Less than 100 kids were found during that time. You just showed me video in one farm.
We looked to the right, we looked to the left, and we saw 2.
So clearly, if we look just on the statistics, neither you or I are going to feel satisfied at what the results are.
I'm left at the end of this thinking that there really isn't anybody out there looking out for James Flores, unless there's the unlikely lightning bolt that one of your federal inspectors is actually going to show up one day.
He himself may not be protected because our investigators were not where he was. But I am hoping that 50 task forces, which went out targeting some of the places that we knew were abusive, would send a ripple effect throughout the industry. And perhaps that farmer who said, I can't look, I can't be the policeman, is going to say, I better double check.
But what about the child labor laws the government is enforcing? What's okay in the fields is taboo in the shop.
You can work in the fields at 12 and 13, but you can't work at your mall. You can't work at the fast food shop. Does the law make sense?
There are a lot of people asking, does it make sense?
Including some people on Capitol Hill. 2 bills now before Congress would forbid children under the age of 14 from working in the fields, with some exceptions for children from family farms. But none of the farmers we met thought much of that proposal. Not Rich Dukowski, the blueberry farmer in Michigan, who hired Yvette and her family, the Villanuevas.
Now, you can pass all the laws you want until you start putting those fathers in jail. You got to put them in jail if you want to institute change. If you want to do this, fine, but I think it's very un-American.
So you think there is a place for kids in the fields?
I think there's a place for kids in the family. That's what I think. How many kids are deserted by their parents because they're working 2 jobs? Before society starts condemning Senor Villanueva's choice of lifestyle, I suggest you look in your own backyard and find out why the kids were shooting one another in school. I'll tell you what, they lost the basics.
Remarkably, after a couple of hours of tinkering, they get the van running again. The Flores ordeal is almost over, or so they think. They're off the freeway on familiar local roads near Edinburgh, Texas. It's dusk by the time they pull up to their house. They have been gone for 4 months. They don't have the key to the locked gate. Pablo is forced to break into his own house. It's apparent right away that it isn't the first break-in since they've been gone. Even in the dark, they can tell that the place has been ransacked. Someone has gotten into their home in the months that they were away. Pablo strings an extension cord from a neighbor to get a light going in his house. Now he can see just how bad they've been hit. Rachel finds her mom's picture in the dirt. The generator that ran the TV set, gone. So's the old VCR. It's been stolen. What isn't flat out missing has been vandalized. Stuff is strewn all over the place. What a homecoming. But it is an amazing thing about this resilient family. It is hard to find the straw that will break their back. Pablo and the kids start cleaning the home that very night. Burning the trash out back. By daylight, the modest house doesn't look that bad. They clean all day. They are home.
This is your place. You shouldn't be moved from here.
After a journey of more than 5,000 miles, 4 months of that van, and living in a trailer in a shabby barn, Pablo has almost nothing to show for his effort. A measly 8 weeks of work is all they found. He has finished his odyssey with a heartbreaking $400 in his pocket, $300 less than when he started. He's thinking about getting a loan from a friend to pay off the outstanding $1,200 utility bills. He's borrowing electricity from a neighbor, and they still have no running water. James is back in school, late. This bright, engaging, hard-working boy will have to catch up on what he's missed. In another 6 months or so, he and the family will be piling back into the van for the trip north. But with a big difference this time. James will be 12, old enough in most states to enter the farm workforce. This time, he'll be legal.
James will, however, still be required to go to school. He spends his weekdays there now and his weekends helping his father pick oranges. Another note, farmer Mike Yeagle says he checked his records and sent the Flores family a check for more than $1,000 to cover the difference between the minimum wage and what they were actually paid. Pablo Flores says he is using the money to buy clothing and things for the house and hopes to soon get his water and electricity turned back on.
That's a great one, but before we go to break, I should update you about this. There was another version of this that was back in 2011, over 10 years ago. It's called American Now, Children of the Harvest, and if I ever get this uploaded, we'll do an episode on that. So I'll let you know what happens. But coming up, 2 more of these issues: the White Flags program and a plan for these school threats. Stay with us. There's now a way to monitor all these school threats with the program that's happening. Take a look at this.
So for example, if it's a student, maybe there's something we can do to support them feel more connected with their community.
United Way and Victims Assistance got a $60,000 grant to contract with Safer Schools Together to have analysts perform online threat management. Safer Schools Together is an international leader in violence prevention and intervention.
A lot of what the analysts are seeing are potentially people posting photos with weapons, people talking about potential suicide ideation or mental health concerns. The whole goal is to wrap around those people and provide support.
Safer Schools Together's Chief Executive Officer, Teresa Campbell, says in 96% of mass attacks, the individual gives off red flags, signs they're planning to do something. United Way's interim executive director, Whitney Swander, explains how the funding will be used.
About 75% of the grant that we received is going directly to the social media monitoring contract, which was kind of the missing piece that we had in our community to provide ongoing services. And then the remainder of funds is to set up the fund at the United Way and to support the administration of the grant activities.
The proactive online management comes as a result of the East Side Safeway shooting. Immediately, following the shooting of 2 men. The gunman's manifesto was found online.
What this grant did is allow us to expand that to apply to all the school districts covering the whole county, and to also apply that to the community at large.
Campbell said the behavioral threat analysts are looking for individuals posting cries for help. Kelsey McGee, News Channel 21.
And I hope it really helps. Now some school leaders are working to combat all these threats.
Threats against their school can be disruptive, like the hoax threat that brought police to Westside in November. Even when authorities say a threat is unsubstantiated and no one is in danger, school leaders say there are still big consequences for students who post those threats online.
News 12's Will Rio spoke with the chief of police for the Columbia County School District to learn more about the consequences students face for making these threats.
Your family might be familiar with these parent letters in both Columbia and Richmond County. It's a trend that school resource officers are working to cut down.
We're on the ball. We're making sure we know what's going on.
This is the first year for Police Chief Gary Owens and his team. Their mission is transparency and to push people to report anything suspicious.
So you're going to see an increase in parent notifications. Things like that are going to be now reported, things that weren't reported before.
When a threat is reported or a weapon is brought on campus, his team will start an investigation.
You know, you have to look at the circumstances and the totality of the entire situation, but also have to look at the safety of the school as a whole. Does it compromise the safety? Does it compromise the integrity of our what we're doing?
Consequences can range from code of conduct violations all the way to criminal charges.
If and when they are returned back into the school, the officers take a lot of diligence in making sure we build a relationship with that student so that we can pick up on things that could mitigate other problems down the road, or possibly build that relationship they didn't have before, that trust.
Owens' message to parents and students: if you see something, say something.
Please have conversations with your children, your students, not just your children, but your students, and say to them what to bring to school, what not to bring to school.
In Columbia County, Will Rio on your side.
And the school resource officers we spoke with say they're always working on building relationships with the community, and they say it's always good to meet and to know who your officers are.
Before we wrap it up here, I have another tip for you. Make a little T-chart. That way your kids will understand. One side, what to bring to school. Another side, what not to bring to school. Hang it up on the refrigerator door. That way they understand, okay, I can bring this, but I can't bring that. That will send us a little message to the child's brain. That way they can understand, oh, if I bring a gun, I can get in trouble. And I would use different colored markers. The blue ones I would use for the right things to bring to school. The red ones are the red flags, what not to bring to school. That's the key I have for you. That's Give Me a Break for Wednesday going to Thursday. Tomorrow on Thursday on Throwback Thursday, the Progress controversy. That's our Throwback Thursday on the GMB YouTube channel. I'll see you then. And we'll see you again for Give Me a Break Friday night. For all of us here at YouTube. I hope you've had a great day. Have a good night.